Morning. This week, the Shavua Dibur Hadash, the week of new kind of talking, a special way of talking, the talking of mediation. Mediation is a growing idea in the world and in Israel. And this week, the whole country is focusing on trying to spread the way of mediation, of talking in a positive way to between people, in such a way to reduce the number of disagreements and make the world a better place to live in. I started looking at Parshat Shavua, at this week's Parsha, to see if there's a connection. And my initial response was, oi, because this week's Parsha is Mishpatim. It talks about the Beit Mishpat, the Beit Din, the laws, the legal system of the Torah. And at the first glance, it seems to the complete opposite of mediation. When people have a disagreement that they can't resolve on their own, they can either go to court or Beit Din, or they can come to mediation. When they go to court, they put everything in the hands of the third party, of the judge or judges, and they make a decision for them based on principles, whether it's Torah principles in Beit Din, whether it's other legal principles in the secular court, and they make a decision for them. On the other hand, when two people come for mediation, each side tells their story, each listens to the side of the other story, and the mediators don't decide anything. All the mediators do is create an environment that the two of them will start talking and understand each other's needs, and they will come to a conclusion themselves. They will find the solution that may be a compromise or may even be better, maybe a win-win. Find a new solution, think out of the box, that'll be even better. So when I open Parshat Mishpatim and you see verse after verse, if two people argue and this one says this and this one says this and he's right and he's wrong, and completely anti-mediation, completely the opposite. Until I came to a verse 2.5 chapters into the Parsha, which I'm going to share with you, which I think sheds light on everything, on the whole Parsha, and in fact, maybe on the whole Torah. And that verse is here in chapter 23 in Shemot, in Exodus. After talking about all these laws, there's a pasuk that says, "V'ger lo tilchatz v'atem yidatem et nefesh hager ki ger hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim." And here we have the translation: "You shall not oppress the stranger, because you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt." And this, I think, if you think about what this verse is saying, he's saying if you really want to understand the other person, you have to empathize with him. You have to be able to put yourself in his place. And what is this law talking about? According to the Pshat, according to the verse is saying that a judge should always be sensitive to people who are sitting before him, and definitely as mediators, we're really trying to be empathetic and listen to the people. But if you have someone who's a stranger, in this case, it could be a convert, but any stranger that doesn't feel at home, then be extra sensitive to him. Be aware of his sensitivity. I remember once doing a mediation with two sets of new immigrants to Israel. And they came from different backgrounds. One came from India and one came from Russia. And they both had this common feeling of, this is really difficult. I'm in a strange place. And mediation is strange. And any time, I know people come to mediation for the first time, there's this uncertainty. But with these people, it was even more. In fact, I made a point of emphasizing that I'm also an immigrant from South Africa, from a strange place, and try to build up this empathy with them. And here the Torah says, on the one side, you can say, because we happen to be in Egypt, so therefore we should have this empathy. But I think there's more than that. If you think the way that Hashem runs the world, what it's actually saying is, I put you in Egypt so that you will be able to empathize. And this is something that's amazing. And if the judge has to do it, and the mediator has to do it, we all have to do it. Every time we talk to somebody, before we become judgmental, put ourselves in their place. And we'll look again at the verse, and we see that the verse that comes straight afterwards are the laws of Shemitah, which we have coming up next year. 6 years you should sow your land and gather its yield. But on the 7th year, on the Shemitah, you shall let it rest, let your land rest, my fellow. Let the needy among your people eat it. And what they leave, let the wild beasts eat. And you shall do the same for your vineyards and for your olive groves. In other words, what happens on Shemitah, till Shemitah, during the 6 years, the rich people are living in one place, and the less fortunate are living in another place. And comes the Shemitah, and all of a sudden, we level the playing ground. All of a sudden, the rich people are eating together with the poor people. The poor people realizes what it's like to be in the place of the rich people. Sometimes you're normally jealous of them, but maybe there's some challenges there. And of course, the rich people realizes what it means to be with the poor people. And this is the implementation of V'ger Lotone, understanding where he comes from. So what I want to suggest, and this may sound far-reaching, but we'll see shortly that it's not, that even though the Torah sends lots and lots of verses of how to solve arguments between people by technical means and who's right and who's wrong, actually the ideal is not that. The ideal is for two people to come together and get agreement between us. Often people ask me, if there's a legal issue, how can you have a mediation? What happens if it goes against the law? So the truth is, both with the law and with the Torah law, if you're talking about something not between man and God, but between two people, if they agree, that's more powerful than the law. The law is only there, the law of Mishpatim, the legal law, and more importantly, Torah law, is only there if the people cannot agree. Let's say, for example, we're arguing about a piece of land. And I said the border is here, and he says the border is there, and we compromise over here. Now, what happens if, in absolute legal terms, the border is not here, but it's over there? It doesn't matter, because this person can give a gift to that person. And we haven't broken any law, because if you're talking about connection between two people, people decide about what they want to give and take. Now, you may think that maybe I'm going a bit far, taking 3 verses and spreading it over the whole parsha. But then I found 2 amazing things that support what I say. First of all, we'll start with the Gaon of Vilna. Gaon of Vilna lived about 150 years ago, but he was unique in his generation. In fact, in many generations. They talk about the rabbis over thousands of years, that even though we have great people today, compared to the previous generations, we're degrading, we're coming down. People as a whole maybe are going up, but the greatest people are not people we have today. We don't have Moshe Rabbeinu today. And the rabbis, the Tanaim who wrote the Mishnah are far greater than those who wrote the Gemara, the appear in the Gemara that came afterwards. And the Geonim who came after those people in the Amoraim are less than them. And the Geonim are greater than the Rishonim that came afterwards. And the Rishonim are greater than the Achronim that came after them, including our generation. One exception to this, they say, is the Gaon of Vilna. And that's why he's called Gaon. Some say notice the Geonim who came just after the Gemara. He was something unique that even if he only came 150 years ago, he had incredible insights that equivalent of the Geonim who lived about 1,000 years ago. And the Gaon of Vilna says in this week's parsha that there's 2 kinds of people. There's shoftim, there's judges, and there's yuatzim, there's advisors. And we say in our davening, when we ask for justice, that Hashem will restore the justice, we say la yuatzim la shoftim. And he says, what's the difference? The shoftim are those that judge in the Beit Mishpat or in the Beit Din. They decide what's right and wrong based on the law. But the yuatzim, they advise people to manage to work together. And he says, that's lechatchila. He proves it from the verses, that the ideal is the yuatzim. And if, for whatever reason, it doesn't work, then you go back and rely on the shoftim as second best. Another support for what I'm saying and I'll show to you now, is the Balaturim, is known as the Tur, wrote the amazing halachic book about 800 years ago that brought together the main opinions from the Gemara, from the Rosh and the Rif and the Rambam, and brought them into a single halachic book. It was called the Arba Turim, that afterwards became the basis for the Shulchan Aruch that we live by today. In addition, he wrote a fairly simple perush, well, not really simple, but a very small, short perush to the Torah, with a lot of hints, a lot of signs that we'll see now, and gematrias and all sorts of things. And this is what he writes on the very, very first pasuk, the first verse in the Torah. The first verse is Ve'ela mishpatim asher tasim lifnehem. These are the laws that you should put before them. And he takes each and every one of these words and says they stand for what's called a nutukun, a sentence. Each letter stands for a word. Okay, the first word, ve'ele, v'chayav adam lachor et adin. When you're looking at justice, you need to go into depth. The second one, hamishpatim, you see the word hamishpatim stands for hadayan mitzveh she'aseh pshara terem yaseh mishpat. The dayan before, more important than to do a mishpat, is to do a pshara, is to do a compromise, to come to an agreement between the people. Asher, Aleph Shin Resh, im shnehem rotzim. This you can only do if both of them want it. One of the principles of Gishur, of mediation, is that you can only do it if both sides are willing to do it. And here, Baal Turim writes this long before the word mediation was developed. Tasim, you should put before them, Taf Shin Yud Mem, Tishma Shnehem Yachad Medabrim. You should have to hear both of them talking when they're together in the room, not talking at the same time, but to both of them present. Don't listen to one and then afterwards go to the other one. And this is one of the stages in mediation where each side has its own chance to tell his story or her story without being interrupted. And this way we can really hear what they're feeling, what their needs, what's really important to them. And finally, Lifnehem, the words stand for Lo Lifnei Nadiv Yadar Yitnaker Mehem. Don't show preference to somebody who seems to be more important, more generous. You've got to be impartial and show the impartiality so that both of them will want to come forward. So I think this is amazing that the Dinim Torah are actually there as a back out in case we can't get people working together. But the ideal is to have this empathy, to have the understanding, to reach mediation. This is the end of the idea, and those of you who feel this is enough can stop the recording right now. I want to spend the next few minutes taking this idea to a lot further depth, because I think there's a lot to be learned from it. In the beginning, in creation, we're told, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the word for God there is Elokim. And we know that there are a few words that describe Hashem. There's Hashem, there's Havaya, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the word that we normally say when we make a bracha, Baruch Atah. We pronounce it Aleph Dalet Nut Yun, or Adon, like a master. There's the word Elokim that we mentioned, and there's many, many other words. And why do we have so many words for one God? It could be confusing. God forbid that people could think that we believe in multiple gods. But the reason is that God is infinite. He has so many different aspects to him that we can't really capture all of them. So what we do as limited people, we take at each time one idea, one aspect of Hashem, and we give it a name. And then we try and understand that. And the name Havaya, the name Hashem, is the name of Chesed, of loving kindness. We learn it from the pasuk that says, Olam Chesed Yibaneh, the world was built through Chesed. Why is Chesed related to creation? Because Hashem didn't need to build the world. He had no need for us. The world was, Hashem's world was perfect before, but he created the world to have a lower world through chesed. And Elohim, on the other hand, is a term of judgment. Judges, in fact, a synonym for judges is Elohim. Now I can say the word Elohim because here I mean it not to mean God's name, but I mean the word judges, and because that's my intention, I can say Elohim and I don't need to say the word Elohim. So immediately you should jump up and say, then why did the first verse in the Torah begin, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'haaretz? Why did the Torah use the word Elohim instead of Hashem? It should have used the word Hashem because we said Olam chesed yibaneh. The world is a proof of God's loving kindness. And the rabbis picked this up immediately. In fact, the word Elohim appears 32 times in the story of Bereshit. 32 is the value of Lev, Lamed Bet, the heart. And they said, why did they use the word Elohim? כי רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לברוא את העולם במידת הדין, וראה שהעולם לא יכול להתקיים, אז צירף אליו מידת הרחמים. Hashem wanted to create the world according to din, according to mishpat. He saw the world could not exist like this. So he joined to the din, the mishpat, the quality of chesed, of rachamim. So according to the simple explanation, we're living in a b'diavad world, right? A world, not a non-ideal world. We should be, the ideal is mishpat, and we've gone back to, we have to have chesed, otherwise we just went lost. But if you think a little bit deeper, one of the points, one of the ideas that we learn and emphasize in mediation is the difference between people's conscious and subconscious, or we call it the difference between their claims and their needs. And we compare it often to an iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is above the water, but the bulk of the iceberg is below the water. So it is also a person has his part that's revealed, that's above the water, and that's his conscious, that's the part that he shares with everybody. That's the part that's very logical, the part that you can actually use, mishpat, logical judgment to judge, to explain, to manage. And then we have the part of the iceberg that's below the water level. We have the subconscious, we have people's needs, people's inner needs. And these are far greater, and because they're so great, because they're so important, people keep them secret. People keep them under the water level. Sometimes we don't even understand ourselves, the full depth of our actual needs. And what we try to do in mediation is when people talk, and we hear the story, we hear the claims, we try and get the story out, we try understand between the lines what the actual needs are. And once you understand people's needs, once they understand their needs, and the two parties understand their needs, very often, more often than not, the claims fall into place, because the claims are not the most important thing. And this is exactly what I think the rabbis are explaining here with creation. This is the same situation. Hashem created the world. Hashem is infinite. Hashem, as we said, brings so many factors together that we cannot understand. He wanted a world that was lower, that was simple, that could grow. A world that was missing, that wasn't perfect, and could deal with growth. And that is the world of Din, of Elokim, or the world of Mishpat. But nevertheless, he saw that this world, if it exists completely isolated, completely cut off from Ruchniut, from the depths, from the subconscious, we're robots. That's not a world. It's a Makana set. It's a city of robots. That's not living. So Hashem, he saw that lo yachol yitkayem, that's got no existence. To make it mitkayem, he added the rachamim. he added the din. The din is the connection from the peak of the iceberg to the main part of the iceberg. The connection from our conscious to our subconscious, or the connection from our needs, from our claims to our actual needs. And this is the idea. And this is, I think, the same thing that we saw in Parshat Mishpatim that I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. That even though when we talk about all the Mishpatim and all the laws, we have to realize that the Ikar is when we get to the verse that says, Et ha-nefesh ha-ger tzrichim lakir. You have to actually understand and empathize with the nefesh of the ger. Shenizkeh b'ezrat Hashem, we should all be able to understand our own needs, other people's needs, and bring this world together to be a better place in the spirit of Mishpatim. Shavua Dibur Chadash Tov. Have a good Dibur Chadash Tov.